Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to unpack the deep psychological and really the philosophical roots of feeling completely aimless and crushed by failure. We've got an absolutely fascinating lineup of modern research and ancient wisdom to get through, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's kick things off by asking a question that pretty much haunts all of us when we're staring down a recent painful setback. Why do our mistakes feel permanent? You know that exact feeling, right? You try something, it completely falls apart, and suddenly it feels like this one failure has literally written a definitive sentence about your entire future. Well, to understand why we get trapped in this awful loop, we actually have to start by looking at what happens before the failure even occurs, back when we're just kind of drifting.
Section 1. The Desert of Aimlessness. Navigating a world without direction.
So our sources describe aimlessness not as this breezy, liberating freedom, but actually as a vast, anxiety-inducing desert where every possible direction is beckoning you at once. When you have no direction, your brain literally signals that overwhelming lack of structure with acute anxiety. There's a brilliant historical analogy for this in our sources. When people escape a terrible situation, like a tyranny, they often think they're stepping into pure freedom. But without a specific vision of where they're actually going, they just wander into a desert. If you drop someone in the middle of a literal desert, they don't panic just because they're lost. They panic because there are a million different ways to go. Anxiety computes aimlessness. Your brain just cannot handle the infinite complexity of having zero direction. And this perfectly illustrates why you feel so empty without a goal. Your brain's positive emotion system is mechanically wired to reward moving forward, which means zero goals equals zero positive emotion. Dopamine isn't just handed out for existing, you know? Your positive emotion system only fires up when it recognizes that the distance between you and a target is actively decreasing. All the pleasure is literally in the moving toward. So if you're sitting around feeling completely numb or just overwhelmingly anxious, neuroscientifically speaking, it's simply because you haven't given your brain a target to track.
Moving into Section 2. Your Brain on Failure. The Neuroscience of the Crash.
Let's see how this all builds into that massive neurological crash that happens when we actually do try something, but we fail. A fascinating TED-Ed study revealed that while beginners absolutely crave praise to stay motivated, a crushing failure can trigger a demoralization that physically stops the brain from learning. In this one study, participants were asked to learn an invented language using runes. The people who were set up to fail spectacularly in the first round, they just kept failing in the second round, even when the playing field was totally leveled out. Why? Because the threat to their self-image was so massive that their brains literally slammed the door shut on new information. The sheer pain of feeling incompetent completely hijacked their ability to master the task.
Now, check out this concept of a prediction error. Dr. Tracy Marks explains this as simply your brain's GPS recalculating after you've taken a wrong turn. See, your brain is the ultimate prediction machine. It expects a certain outcome. But when reality doesn't match that internal forecast, boom, you experience a sharp drop in dopamine. It feels awful, but actually that's just your brain's learning system turning on. It's basically saying, hey, reality doesn't match our map anymore, we need to adapt. It's a hugely incredible opportunity for neuroplasticity and growth.
The problem is, we often just repeat our mistakes instead of recalculating. Why? Because these powerful internal blockers trigger a massive emotional hijack. This shifts our prefrontal cortex offline and dumps us straight into pure survival mode. Instead of acting like a calm, cool GPS system, our amygdala flares up with shame, frustration, and anxiety. We avoid reflecting on the mistake because, honestly, it just hurts too much. Or, if we have a fixed mindset, we take the error as hard proof that we just aren't smart enough. We completely miss the lesson because we're way too busy trying to just survive the emotional blow.
Which brings us to Section 3, Failing versus Being a Failure, the identity trap. This survival mode we just talked about pulls us directly into an identity trap that makes moving forward feel virtually impossible. You know this exact feeling. You're compulsively refreshing a page, rereading a rejected pitch, or replaying a conversation in your head, secretly terrified that you've just been exposed as incapable. As one of our sources points out, at this stage, this behavior isn't even about the outcome itself anymore. It's a very specific flavor of dread. It's the feeling of being caught. You didn't just want the project to succeed. You needed it to succeed to prove something fundamental about who you are. The failure didn't just expose a bad plan. It exposed an identity problem.
So the absolute crucial point here is understanding this massive difference. You have to stop hiring your individual results to dictate your permanent identity. Think about the contrast. Failing is just a sentence about an event, right? I tried this and it didn't land. Being a failure, on the other hand, is a permanent sentence you've written about your entire self,
I am someone who doesn't make it. If you merge those two things together, you are going to be constantly paralyzed by the fear that one single wrong move will destroy your entire sense of self. Modern psychology calls this ego protection. It perfectly explains why we delay starting things. Because as long as we haven't actually tried, our comforting little self-story remains safely untested. If you never launch that business, or post the video, or take that advanced class, well, you never actually have to find out if you're good at it. You get to keep the comfortable fantasy. But remember what we talked about earlier. If you stay in the fantasy and never aim at a real, tangible goal, you just end up wandering that anxious, empty desert of aimlessness. Section 4. How to debug mistakes. The video game retry. So how do we actually short-circuit this ego protection and process our missteps without falling into total despair? Thomas Frank suggests a brilliant approach. We have to get some emotional distance, do our damage control, and then analyze the failure mechanics rather than just blindly throwing ourselves at it again. Think about playing a video game. When your character falls into a pit of spikes for the 10th time, you don't sit there and question your worth as a human being. You just figure out, oh, I needed a running start, and then you try again, smarter. But to do this in real life, you have to let the emotional sirens in your brain quiet down first. Sleep on it, play a game, vent to a friend. Once your logic finally takes back over, you can treat your real-life failure with that exact same cool-headed engineering mindset. To do this effectively, Dr. Tracy Marks provides this awesome 4-step mental debugging process to clean up our faulty cognitive code and bypass that whole brain hijack. Step 1. What was your prediction? Surface those hidden assumptions you had. Step 2. What are the plain facts of what actually happened? No judgments here, just the facts. Step 3. Where was the disconnect? Was your expectation totally distorted? And finally, step 4. What is one small, manageable shift you can practice next time? Walking through these specific steps forces your logical prefrontal cortex to stay online, literally rewiring your brain to treat mistakes as useful data instead of existential threats. And finally, Section 5, the effort is the win, releasing the outcome. This brings us to our final and probably most profound shift, turning to ancient philosophy to fundamentally reframe our relationship with effort. As the Bhagavad Gita taught the paralyzed warrior Arjuna thousands of years ago, your only job is to act honestly with what you have, because the outcome itself was never yours to control in the first place. Arjuna was terrified of fighting a battle because the potential outcome threatened to destroy everything he was. The answer he received wasn't a comforting guarantee of victory. It was a serious reality check. You cannot guarantee the results of your actions. Asking for both growth and absolute certainty, those are completely opposite requests. The literally only thing that is fully yours is the effort you put in. Buddhist philosophy mirrors this perfectly too. It shows us that when we inevitably face life's unfairness, our true power lies entirely in managing our internal perspective rather than trying to force external outcomes. Think about it. So much of our anxiety comes from trying to manipulate things that are strictly out of our control. Other people's opinions, totally unfair situations, the final outcome of a project. When life doesn't go your way, you just have to analyze what is actually in your control. If it's your mistake, great, you correct it. If it's the situation is out of your hands, the only logical step is to change your perspective. Because honestly, when we expect life to be perfectly fair and outcomes to always match our effort, we are practically guaranteeing our own suffering. As the teachings point out, life is inherently a little bit unfair and filled with the unexpected. If you walk into every single situation demanding that your effort yields the exact fruit you envisioned, you are going to be in constant agony. Releasing the outcome doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you stop expecting the universe to act like a vending machine, where effort equals an automatic, highly specific reward. I'm going to leave you with this final echoing thought from our sources. If the universe ultimately handles the results, and you only ever controlled the effort, why are you carrying the weight of the entire world on your shoulders? Next time you face a massive failure, try asking yourself if you genuinely put in an honest effort. Because if you did, that is your win right there. The rest, it was never up to you anyway. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep aiming forward, keep debugging those mistakes, and most importantly, keep your identity completely separate from your results. Catch you next time.